Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the United States Association of Blind Athletes, last day of National Blind Sports Week. And tomorrow we'll segue into our active National Blind Sports Day. But today, the last day of National Blind Sports Week, and we're going to switch gears and get into a track and field mode. This afternoon, I am so pleased and honored to introduce you to my good friend and colleague, Kathy Sellers. Kathy Sellers was employed with the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee for 9 years. She attended 3 Paralympic Games starting in 2008 as the team leader in Beijing, then the head track coach in 2012 and 2016. She worked 9 years for the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, and then also was a manager at USA Track and Fields for 6 years. She attended Texas Women's University and currently is a consultant helping people with being better and organizations being better. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I am so honored and pleased to introduce you to Kathy Sellers. Thank you, Kathy, for being here today.
Oh, you're welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. We have a lot of material to cover, and if we get it all done, great, but if we don't panic. I have sent this presentation on to Kat, and Kat can distribute it to you. And then my email is at the bottom of this screen. So if you have questions, you can write to me. That'd be great. So on this screen, we have a variety of events that are offered at the Paralympic Games. We have the sprints with David Brown and Jerome Avery. Jerome is David's guide. David at one time was the world record holder in the 100 meters. Then we have Isaac Jean-Paul, who is a high jumper, long jumper. Within in the lower screen, we have Lex Gillette, who's a T11 long jumper with his guide, Wes Williams. Lex is flying through the air and you can see his feet, and Wes is watching him. And then in the bottom corner, we have Kim Crosby, a T13 woman sprinter. So that gives you an idea of some of the events that we're going to cover today. So here's a list of the Tokyo events, and both men and women have the 100. The women have the 200 for the 11 and 12 class. Both men and women have the 400 for all 3 VI classes. Both men and women have the 1500 for all VI classes. The men have the 5000 for the 11, 12s, and 13s. The marathon is offered for the 11 and 12 athletes, both men and women. The long jump is offered in the men for 11, 12, and 13, and for the women, just 11 and 12. The discus is offered for the 11s. The javelin is offered for the 12s and 13s in both men and women's, and the shot is offered for the 11 and 12 in both men and women. So those are the Tokyo events. These events will not change for Tokyo, but they possibly could change for Paris. Events are chosen based on the number of athletes competing in those events around the world, as based on the IPC and the world listing. So all events are not offered all the time. They may show up more often in a world championships, which is good because it gives an opportunity to see how thick or how developed the field is in a particular event. So eligible guide classes, T11s, they get 1 guide for running and throwing, but 2 guides for the long jump and 2 guides for the 5,000 and longer. That's both men and women. And in the T12 class, they get 1 guide for running, throwing, and long jump, and 2 guides for the 5,000 or longer. And if a guide is used in any event, they must finish the competition. So there are some needs of Team USA, and basically those needs are throwers, distance runners, and long jumpers. It is true that we have some really good long jumpers, particularly in the men's side. We do not have those. We do not have that strength in the women's long jump. So how do you make a team? Making a team is based on your performance compared to the National Team A standard. And that standard is published in the Athlete Performance Plan, which is on the website for Paralympic track and field. So all you have to do is Google Paralympic track and field, go to the Athlete Sport Plan, and it will give you the standards required for each event that's being offered. So it's your performance. It's all performance-based. It doesn't matter what class you are. It doesn't matter what event you're doing. It is all based on your performance compared to the National Team A. So in some events, we might be taking 3 athletes. In some events, we may take absolutely no one. The lowest performance standard, or the lowest performance that was selected for Rio, was 94% of the A standard. And we knew that we had a very, very strong team going into Rio because the A standard is usually based on the 3rd place performance of the previous game or the previous world ranking list. Right now, if you're young and you don't have experience, your goal should be to work toward the B standard. But knowing that the closer you are to the A, the better chance you have to make a team. So what are those requirements? First, you have to be internationally classified. There's 2 types of classifications, a national and an international classification. International is done by the IPC, and they have trained classifiers who are optometrists or ophthalmologists, and they have gone through training from the IPC. And there's usually a panel of 2 or 3 who will check your vision and go through all sorts of vision testing. And to be able to do an international classification, you must first have your national medical paperwork on file to even get an appointment. And these appointments are kind of tough because we only offer 1 classification a year internationally in the US. I'm not sure exactly where that's going to be for the next year, but it's going to be imperative that if you are close to these standards, that you get that national medical paperwork on file immediately, if not sooner. You have to have a current IPC license, which means that you need a valid passport. So if you do not have a passport at this time, it might be something that you should start applying for. Since people aren't traveling as much, it might be a little faster for you to get a passport. And then once you have the passport, that determines your citizenship, which is why you have to have it for the IPC license. And then your performance for the national team, or actually to make national team status, has to be at an IPC approved event. And you can get any event, well, I'm not going to say any event, but you can get major events IPC approved. There's certain criteria for that. You have to have the measurement of the track. You're using fully automatic timing. We usually do it for major competitions, but if you're going to have your state high school championship, that would be considered a major competition. And if you want to get that IPC approved, there again is a form on the Paralympic track and field website. So to make the Tokyo team, you have to go to the trials. And your performance at the trials is, we look at that compared to your national team A, and that's how you get selected. And this year, it's going to be June 17th, or next year, it's June 17th through the 20th in Minneapolis. So you might circle those dates to know that that's when the trials are. And you need to have all of the above things done prior to signing up for trials. So here's some new things in the VI world. There is a new tether, and they're very difficult to come by. I just want you to know that there's a new tether, what it kind of looks like. They're not in ready production, but they will be used at any international or major international competition. But if you've been using, let's say, a shoestring with 2 loops, this is going to be fairly easy to adapt to. All it is you still have the loops. You have the holding loop. So it's 2 loops on either end with a band across. It is not elastic, and it has a locking mechanism for the holding loop and then a sphere for the 10 centimeters. There is a different tether length for road races, but since we're talking basically about track and field today, your tether, the centerpiece of the tether can only be 10 centimeters, then you have the 2 loops. The whole tether is 30 centimeters, and for road events, it's 50 centimeters. Training technical aspects. Technique for competition is exactly the same as for traditional athletes. The starting blocks are still the same. The equipment is still the same. The coaching of the technique is still the same. There's nothing that really changes. The only thing that changes is the coaching. Coaching is different because it requires some modification of communication. So you have to figure out what's the best learning method of the athlete that you're working with. So what are some of the learning methods? When we talk about this, this is like visual. You say, do you see what I am doing? That's visual. And for some of the athletes, of course, they're not going to be able to see what you're doing. And David Brown would always tell me, yep, coach, I saw that. And he's a T11 and totally blind. So you have to remember that there's a sense of humor that goes with this sometime if you make mistakes. Auditory. When you do auditory, you have to be very clear and very concise. You cannot remember, or the athlete can't remember more than probably 3 cues that you give them. Some of them, it needs to be 1 to 2 cues. And that's with traditional athletes, with VI athletes, with cerebral, it doesn't matter. With any athlete, they can only take in so much information and then do what you're asking them to do. So try to limit it, try to be clear, try to keep it simple, and try to be very concise. Then there's the kinesthetic. Sometimes that's a feeling, the kinesthetic awareness, feeling, knowing where your body is in space. Sometimes you have to put the athlete in the position that you want them to be in to do the technical aspect. So either the coach gets into that technical position, like if I'm throwing the discus, I might want them to feel my foot as I pivot my foot in the center of the ring. So that the athlete would actually put their hands on my foot and see how I'm pivoting it, or the coach takes the athlete's foot and actually moves them into that position. Either one are valid, but it's always best to tell the athlete that you want to touch them to get them in the right place and where you're going to touch them. It's always just a good cue and help the athlete. Okay, in the sprints, we're going to go through this really fast, you guys, so sorry. Blocks are required for all the classes. So how do you set up blocks? Well, the first thing you do is you have to figure out which is going to be your back foot and which one's going to be the front foot in the blocks. So you can act like you're kicking a ball, or have your back to somebody and let them gently kind of push you, not shove you, just gently push. And the foot that you step out with, or the foot that you kick the ball, is the foot that will go in the front pedal. So blocks, they're a straight bar, and on either side of the bar is a pedal. And the front pedal is the foot that you kick a ball with, or that you step out with when somebody touches you or nudges you. The back pedal, of course, is going to be the other foot. So you place the starting blocks take one of your feet, put your heel on the start line, and put the front of the block where your toe is. And you want to try to have it in a straight line. Unless you're running the 200 or 400, then you're going to place it at the angle of the curve, trying to point it to the apex of the curve. So you've got your starting block. You've put your foot on the back of your heel on the start line. Toe, you put your block down. Then the front pedal is 2 feet, toe to toe, or toe to heel. and you put your front block there. That's where your free foot goes, the foot that you kick the ball with. And next, take the rear pedal and put it 3 lengths back, heel, toe, and put the pedal there. Both hands and fingertips are placed on the track behind the starting position. Now, you're going to lean forward a little bit, and this position is not going to be really comfortable. And that's something that you have to work on. So the hands, where do the hands go? We've got the feet, 2 for the free foot, 3 for the power foot. Hands are directly under your shoulders. Don't put them out to the side. They go directly under your shoulders. Your arms are straight, but they're really not locked. Okay? To tell your coach, the front pedal leg should be about 90 degrees in the set position. So when you come up, when you rise up, so on your mark, your hands are down, you're in your blocks, set is when your hips raise up, and you don't want to raise up more than 90 degrees in that front pedal. So that's something that you should look at, is that 90-degree angle. Your head is down. If I lift my head up, the rest of my body follows my head. And that takes away the whole benefit of working on a start or having a start, because you're not driving. Now you have stood up and are stepping out of the blocks instead of driving out of the blocks. In the blocks, you are actually pushing out at an angle. And my cue for pushing out of the blocks is first off, you're going to push. If I was standing in front of you with my hands on your shoulders, you should try to knock me down or try to hit me in the belly button. So have that visualization that you're trying to drive out of the blocks that hard. Think 3 quick arms or 3 fast steps. Just choose one of them. And that's your arm action is boom, 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 or your legs, the same thing. 3 really fast steps. Pick one, it doesn't matter which. So there are some phases in the sprint. From the blocks to 10 to 12 and 20 meters, depending upon your strength, is called a push phase. All you're doing is push, 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 push. When you get to 10, 15, or 20 meters, depending upon your strength and how well you're able to go into a push phase, you start changing from the angle of the sprint gradually to where you stand up. So it's called a transition, and that's about 10, 15 meters, where you go from pushing out of the blocks to gradually standing up. And once you are upright, your mechanics change from a push to a pull. And there's all sorts of drills, the A drill, the B drill, the C drill. You can look those up. It's all sorts of where you are actually with your foot pawing down. You want to paw down on the ground because you want to pull the ground instead of push. And then the final one, there's actually about 10 of these, but this is a basic concept on this. The last one is the finish. You have to practice the finish. And if you have a guide, the athlete must finish ahead of the guide. That's one of the most common reasons for disqualification. The guide gets a little too excited or fails to back off in time for the athlete to finish ahead. Next, we're going to move to long jump. So I have 2 lanes for T11 and 12. Well, that's actually a track rule. 11s and 12s always get 2 lanes, and they start at lane 1. It's lane 1, 3, 5, and 7 are the lanes that are assigned. So the guide and the athlete will both be in lane 1, not in lane 1, but they will be at the starting point for lane 1. The next group will be at the starting point for lane 3, and it doesn't matter if the guide's on the right or the left. Doesn't matter at all. It's a personal preference. So let's talk now about long jump. Sorry about that. In the long jump, what you have is a picture of the runway with an area for the powder and the landing area. And so you have the scratch line, which means if the foot crosses over the scratch line, it's a foul. But in the VI, in the 11 and 12 long jump, we usually put flour, and it's a 1 meter area, and any place in that area that the athlete jumps from is legal, and you mark it from the toe. Even if the athlete does not make it to the takeoff area and takes off earlier, you mark it from where the toe is on the runway. So this is a little different than the traditional track and field. And the guide can stand on either side of the runway, and they can stand between the landing area and the powder area or the takeoff board. They cannot stand in that 1 meter power area or in the landing area. So the guide has an opportunity to be any of those places, and that's something that everybody practices and makes sure that they know where they want their guide. We typically stand between the takeoff board and the landing area in the middle of the board so that the guide has the athlete sound, hopefully, is coming straight at them and not from the side. Problem is, in major arenas where there's lots of noise, confusion reigns in this particular setup, just because the noise is so loud that the athlete sometimes has a hard time hearing. The guide can call by voice, clapping, or combined, and we try to use simple phrases. We use fly because it's easy, it's 1 syllable, and we use clapping in combination with that, and it's just fly, 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 and the athlete can pick up the sounds all the way down the runway, hopefully. The athlete should know the number of steps to be in the takeoff area. So the athlete should be counting their steps. They should have a rhythm down. They should have done the run up enough times that they know their rhythm, and they know that they're going to go at 13 steps, going to be on the board and take off at that point. Rhythm in the run up is slow to fast, and you want to have top controlled speed at takeoff. So it's not the fastest you can go, it's the most controlled speed that you can handle. Beginners usually take 6 to 7 strides. You may start with fewer number than that, just to try to develop the rhythm. I mean, if you're thinking about this, to me, this is kind of a very scary thing. You have no idea where the runway is. You have a clue that it's in front of you. You don't know where the landing pit is. So you're totally relying on the guide. So there has to be a huge confidence. And I would start off with smaller run up to get used to where the runway goes and how it goes in the pit. And the guide sets them up in the very back of the runway as they come down. Start approaches on the track. Practice all of them on the track first. And then once you feel like they can go on a straight line, you got lanes on the track. Work on being in the lane, always being in the lane. And start looking for that where they kind of veer in and out of the lane. Okay. As a coach, you develop 2 check marks. One is for the first step, and one is about, I'd say about the 3rd step from the back. So you can see if they're making an error. So what happens is, and this is going to be true in the shot, discus, and jav, errors that happen in the beginning just get magnified as you go along. And with these check marks, you can determine where the error is occurring. A mantra in the long jump could be drive out of the back, accelerate, and attack the board. So drive, accelerate, and attack. The posture at takeoff is upright. The takeoff foot should be under the body. And the reason why you want it under your center of mass, and then you push, and you're pulling your foot on the board. You're actually pulling your foot over your center of mass so that you can get the height at takeoff, and you drive your free knee up. Again, this is all very, very common traditional long jump philosophy. So if you're looking and you're going, what in the world? There are lots of videos out there. There's lots of videos of Paralympic Games. There's lots of other videos. Look at some good videos. Start adapting your philosophy of how you want to teach the long jump. So throws principles. We've got 3 throws to cover. Then we're going to do the shot, then the discus, and then the javelin. So the principles in the shot. Everything in track and field is an acceleration pattern. It doesn't matter if you're doing the long jump, if you're doing the sprints, it doesn't matter. It's an acceleration. It goes slow to fast. In the sprints, those first 3 steps, yes, they're vigorous and they're hard, but it's slower than what you're going to see at the middle of the race. Errors in the beginning magnify. So any mistake I make at the beginning of something just gets bigger and bigger as I go along. Sorry. In the preliminary movements in the throw, it is all horizontal. It's more horizontal drive, and then at the end, it's a lift. So it goes horizontal, and at the end, it lifts. That's your body, that's your chest, that's your implement. And in delivery, it's more lift as you're getting ready to throw the implement. In the delivery, it's more lift, more upward than horizontal. And you want to apply force over the longest range of motion. So the longer I can have my arm back in the discus, it allows me to pull more on the discus. If I'm here and very short, I only have this little space to move. But if I'm further back, it allows me to pull more on the discus. So force applied over the longest range of motion, shot included. The longer I can get this, the better off I am. Body weight. This is all about transferring of body weight from the rear leg to the front leg. A lot of people think that the throws are all about the arms. They're not. It's all about the legs and the strength of the legs. So the legs are the part that actually propel the implement or get you in position to propel the implement. That's the biggest assist right there, is in the legs. Movement is from the ground up. And you're going to see a sequence. It's going to be feet, then your knee, then your hips, then your trunk, then your arms, and head. In some cases, it might be feet, knee, hip, trunk, head, arm. Okay? But notice it's always starting at the feet. The action in the throws always start at the first point of contact with the ground, which is the feet. So I've given you some weights. The weight for the women shot putters, it's 4K. If you're under 17, it's 3K. Unless you're in high school, you may have to throw the 4K because that's the traditional high school weight. The men in the open, it's 7.26K. If you're under 20, it's a 6K. And a U17 throws a 5K. So we typically throw the implement weight that the high school athletes are throwing. So please understand that. And that's important because we don't want high school staff to go out and buy a whole bunch of different weighted implements because that we're competing with them. The next thing is you have to determine what your technique is. Is it going to be a glide or rotation? And I've got the next slide. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The glide is a great way to start a beginner. And it helps you get the concepts down. It helps you understand coming out of the back of the circle. It helps you with a power position. And it's just a little easier rotation. Sometimes you skip right past your power position. One of the things I think is really important is in the ring, both discus and shot, to take a piece of chalk and draw a center line vertically and then horizontally across the ring, because you need to know where your feet are in the ring. And you want to try to stay as close to those midlines as you can. And there's reasons for that. So, I don't know, over here, the glide, you start in a crouch position, your free leg goes up and then tucks down, to match your other knee, and then it drives across the ring. Where in the rotation, you're actually spinning into that position. And like I said, sometimes a beginning athlete will miss the power position by doing rotation. So it's really good to teach the glide, get them to understand that, and then you can move to rotation. So here's what this is it's the crouch position in the back, and the athlete is balanced on their power leg. So you're in a very tight, compact crouch, facing the back of the ring. Your free leg, so you're balanced on one leg, your free leg drives up, then it comes down and almost meets your other knee that's still in that crouch position, and drives down and across the ring. You are trying to get to the center of the circle with your power leg hitting the center of the ring. Power position. If you do nothing else in practice, this is the one position you have to understand. You're in the center of the ring. The power foot lands on the ball of the foot. And the weight, all of your weight, is on this power leg, the foot that's in the center of the ring. You should be able to lift up your free leg, lift it up, doesn't matter. You can lift it, put it down, lift it, put it down, because all your weight has to be on that power leg. Work this position the most. Remember, the weight remains on this power foot, and the shoulders are facing the back of the ring. So everything is facing the back of the ring. Now, when you are in this position, you want to be on the ball of the foot, because that power foot is going to have to be very, very active. And we'll talk about that right now. So you've hit the power position, and now your power foot is going to pivot. That means you're staying on the ball of your foot, and your foot turns to the heel, pivots to the back of the ring. So you've just pivoted. It's like you're squishing a bug or putting out a cigarette. Hardly anybody does that anymore. But what you want to do is keep that foot active so your hips can turn to the front. That's one of the keys in both discus and the shot, is to keep the power foot active. And as soon as it hits, you're trying to keep your weight on it, keep your weight on that power foot, and drive your hips around. And the only way you can do that is by pivoting. You could possibly just shift your weight, but when you do that, you've lost all the force in your legs. You've kind of stood up. You have done what we call a crotch shift, which means the power has gone from this side and it's just shifted over. Instead, what you want is just this, it's hard to describe this foot turn, and then your hips are around, and you still have your power foot in play. The weight is still on the rear leg. Okay, so that gives you an idea of that particular part. The release, everything, you keep your arm up at 90 degrees. If you drop your arm, you're going to throw the shot, and that can be injurious to you. So keep your elbow up, and it's a push. It is a put. It is not a throw. You are pushing it off your fingertips here. You're pushing it, and at the end, as you get full extension, you're flipping the hand. Okay? And I've put in on this slide some things for you to actually watch, and articles to look at, and some drills that you can learn. So now let's go to the we'll go to the discus. Women throw 1K. They throw it in high school, they throw it in college, and they throw it in Paralympics. The men in the open throw a 2K, and that is the collegiate weight. The under 20s throw a 1.75, which is kind of a master's weight, and the U17s throw a 1.5K. So these come with different discuses. Well, discus are sold by rim weight. And the more rim weight you have, so it has if you look at there's a metal band that goes around the inside of the discus, and I recommend getting the plastic style. They're not necessarily plastics, but they're a plastic type material instead of wooden discuses. Wooden discuses, when they get scraped up, and they have a tendency, if they get wet, they have a tendency to warp. The plastic style does not. And what the more rim weight means is that as you throw it, when you release it, it's spinning and it's moving itself a little bit further every time it spins. So rim weight, if it says 75%, it means 75% of the discus weight is actually on the rim, and the rest of it is in the center of the discus. So for beginners, I would get the lower rim weight. I think it's more important to have more discuses that you can throw, and then have one that you save for competition. So if you buy a lot of cheap ones, and then have a couple that have a little more rim weight. 60 to 75% is for an intermediate thrower. So you don't need a lot of rim weight. 50-50, 40-60, you can look for those kind. I want to mention a little bit about the shot, go back a little bit on the shot. Shots come in diameters. It can be a 4K and be a 99, which is going to be a little bitty shot. And it's going to be really heavy. It's still 4K, even if it's a 1.9 or 0.9. So you want the larger diameter because you want to be able to apply force over the surface for a longer period of time. A smaller discus, smaller shot is different in your hand and you don't have the same feel. So try to get the bigger diameter that you can, okay? So discus, let's get back to it. Discus rests right on the first curvature, the little ridges in your fingers. And they just kind of rest. Some people think you grip it, and athletes are always afraid they're going to drop it, but your movement in the discus will prevent you from dropping it. Even seated throwers hold a discus in this manner. Now, in picture 1, you notice the hands are evenly spread apart. In 2, they're skewed to the side, so there's more distance. Doesn't matter, you pick the feel that you like the most. The thumb on the discus, very, very limited, because if you put a lot of pressure on your thumb, you're going to alter the flight, and that can cause it to wobble some in the air, and you don't want that any type of resistance. You want it to be a smooth sail through the air. One of the things that you can learn or do to learn the feel of the discus, and it should come off your little index finger, you'll always know a good discus thrower because they'll have a callus on this index finger, is to bowl the discus. Just do it like you're bowling. Just put it in your hand, much like the second figure, and just bowl it. Just roll it out of your hand and let it come off that index finger. I like the second diagram because it kind of shows you where it fits on the finger, how it hits, where the thumb is, and how it hits on your forearm. Okay, we're going to talk about the discus turn. First off, you are balanced out of the back. Both feet are on the ground and you are balanced out of the back. Your weight is on both feet. You kind of have your knees are kind of bent because you're going to be turning and you have to have some way to push to make the turn. The turn starts with the left heel, if you're a right-handed thrower, with your left heel rotating out. So you're going to rotate that foot, keep it rotating, and all of a sudden you'll get to a point where you actually have to turn. Wait for that point to make the turn. So it starts with the left heel rotating out. When you get to the certain point, you're going to feel it. the left arm and the left knee stay in alignment. You don't let the left arm get ahead of the left knee. If you do so, you end up in a position called in the bucket, which means you're on the other side of the center point. Okay, left arm moves wide, long, and slow. It's kind of like a ballerina. You want this to be slow. Remember, we're going to go slow to fast. I want this action to be very graceful coming out of the back, and I want it to be slow. Shoulders stay back as long as possible because we're trying to get the most force we can apply in the longest period of time that we can apply that force. Let the feet, knee, and hips do all the work at this point. You're going to drive. Once that knee turns, you're going to drive your right leg to the center of the ring. Remember, just like in the shot, we're going to keep that foot active. So think of it as the upper body going slow and the lower body going quick. That causes what we call separation. Power position, just like the shot, except you have an extended arm instead of a short arm. So you have this long arm with the discus being held in the back. The shoulders should still be closed. That means they're facing the back of the ring. The power foot, or that right foot, is actively pivoting. And you want to try again to get the hips around to face forward. In this case, the head is going to go up so that we start working on the lift of the chest. We're trying to get our chest up at the front of the ring. The shoulder is back. You're still developing torque, or the discus is really still back. You're trying to develop torque, which means you're trying to figure out an easy definition. All you're trying to do is provide the longest distance that you can and keep your body twisted so that you're going to untwist and use that power. The right arm will start to pull on the discus. The left arm is going to do what we call a blocking action. So the left arm comes up high, then it stops, and it's like a door. So all of a sudden you shut the door and it goes boom at the end. It goes a lot faster. This side, the left side, stays firmly planted, does not rotate. The other side rotates around a firm left side. Chest and head are up, and the right arm pulls for release. So here's some things that happen. If the discus goes out the right sector line, that means you haven't pivoted and you haven't gotten your hips around. So you need to work on the pivot and getting your hips around so that you can go down inside the sectors. If it goes out the left, what's happened is when you've made your first turn, you've over-rotated into the center. You're past, remember we had these marks in the center of the circle? You've over-rotated. You have probably let your left arm pull you through, and now you're off balance when you get to the center, and you're going to over-rotate, and it's going to send you out the left sector. So that's two things that you can work on to make sure that you correct those issues. And if you do it right, you're going to be pretty close to the middle of the sector, or at least in the sector, so that you don't have any foul throws. And here's a couple. There's one. I recommend Meg Ritchie Stone's video on the discus. You can pick it up. I've put on the slide here a place that you can get it for $20. Meg used to be, she was one of the first throws coaches that we had in Paralympic track and field. She's a wonderful coach, and she gives you lots of drills and things to work on. And I highly recommend that if you are a discus thrower. You'll pick up some other things. And then there's a whole series of things here on Google that I recommend that you go ahead and look at. Last one, we're going to talk about the javelin. This is probably the most complicated of them all. And the javelin, the women's weight is a 600 gram, U17 is 500 gram. And the men, the open and U20 is 800 grams, and the U17 is 700 grams. Javelins are rated by distance. Buy for your current distance. If you are throwing 30 meters, you do not need a 50-meter javelin. It will not fly further. In fact, your technique has to be more perfect to get those distances. So buy what's appropriate for where you are now. So down below, we have the different grips. We have 3 basic grips in the javelin. You have the Finnish, the fork, and the American. The difference between the Finnish and the American is where the index finger is, and the fork splits between the handle, the chords, and a lot of people, for beginners, I think the fork works very well. So parts of the javelin throw, and I know this is a lot of material quick, so I'm sorry about that, but start with the carry. The carry is the javelin is held above the shoulder, the elbow is pointed forward, and the palm is up. Very important to keep the palm up in the javelin throw. If it starts moving, if it comes down, then you have a tendency to throw the javelin inappropriately, and it can cause injuries. We see some athletes hurting their elbow. Tommy John surgery is the only way to correct that, and it's very limiting. So keep the palm up. The withdrawal is you go from the carry position to getting ready to throw. So the javelin starts going back as you're going down the runway. You're going to do what they call a crossover, kind of like a karaoke. If you're familiar with drills, the karaoke is one where you bring your feet over, cross over in front. You want to keep the tip of the javelin close to your level of your eye, or just slightly, not really above your head, because that will change the angle of the throw. And the hips, the throwing action starts really with the hips turning slightly, and that's where you're getting in that karaoke position. The rhythm, if you're doing, this is kind of like your steps, and the last 5 strides, and you can work on this a lot, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's a rhythm, or it's left, right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, left. And it's very quick, those last 2 strides, because that's where you're putting the impetus. Again, it's legs, and that's where you're putting the emphasis on the legs to get them in the position to make the throw. And this is a sample of a 7-step approach. For beginners, I might start them out. You want to do the 5, get the 5 down, and then start adding 2 at a time to that mark. Okay. Here we're talking about the crossover. You can see on this, on the first drawing, the right leg crossing over the left leg. And we're getting in that position. Like I said, it's kind of like a karaoke position. The left foot then extends for the plant, and you're looking for this reverse C. In that last slide, or photo drawing, you can see that reverse C. And you can see that the palm is up on this athlete, and they're initiating the throw. They're going to stop everything on the left side, just like we did in the discus, and come through with the javelin. People talk about coming through the point of the javelin. And what that means is when I go to throw, when I throw it, I should see the javelin like it's a little silver dot going through the sky. I don't see the whole javelin itself. I'm just seeing the flight, the tail of the javelin. Okay, again, here's some other resources for you. And I know that there are probably some questions. So Kat, Mark, we are now open for any questions, sir.
All right, thank you, Kathy, for your wonderful explanation on blind track and field. So some questions thrown at you. So if a athlete is attending high school, how does an athlete know what sport to get in? There's so many disciplines in track and field. How do you know which discipline to get into?
Well, the first thing is um, size is not a determinant. Okay. A lot of people think you have to be really, really big to be a thrower. Not true. You have to have a lot of skill to be a thrower. You have to be very smart to be a thrower and very smart to be a long jumper. If you're fearless and you have good speed, I'd be a long jumper and I would work on that. Um, in your high school, it depends upon what event's going to be offered. The coach should be able to give you some good advice. Everybody thinks you're a sprinter, but you actually might be a better distance runner. So talk to the coach. The coach would have a pretty good idea. And it's also what you like. If you like to run by yourself for periods of time, if you're a 13 or possibly a 12, that's great. And 11, if you just like to be running for longer distances and enjoy the process of just running and having that kind of freedom in a sense, you have to find a good guide, and then run distance. If you feel like you're really powerful, I will tell you the reason why out of a VI camp, we did some testing and I told David Brown I wanted him at Chula Vista because he was powerful. He had a 42-inch vertical jump, which means you stand, you put a mark on a wall, then you just 2 feet jump up and touch. He had 42 inches. That is like unbelievable. And he hit the gutter on the building in Chula Vista, just off a 2-foot jump. And that kind of power with his body type really was adaptive to sprints.
So David went to a state school for the blind, and that's more of a segregated environment. But what kind of advice do you have for a sighted student who wants to fully integrate within their able-bodied track team? How do they advocate for themselves, and what kind of advice would you have for a student athlete wanting to get on their high school track team?
First, just try to make it as easy as possible with the coach. Don't try to place all these extra demands on the coach. You have to figure out some of the things of how you're going to adapt to the situation and then show the coach the talent. Track coaches pretty well, there's only a handful that I know that did cuts. Most of them, if you want to run track, they want you in their program. So it's your determination and your hard work that will help you continue in that program. If you're in a blind school, I highly recommend, because your season is not usually during the typical track season, I would suggest trying to run open meets, trying to get into some of the high school events if you can. If not, there are USA track and field competitions offered all over the place. And the officials, we have been working very hard. We have taught a number of officials. We have about 300 in our current database or more of officials that understand Paralympic track and field. And the only requirement is if you're an 11 or 12, if you have a guide, you're going to need 2 lanes.
Most of those meet directors and track officials then know all those adaptations, or is there some education process that needs to take place from the athlete and that athlete's coach?
I would recommend that the athlete check first, not assume. But like I said, we have educated a lot of officials on track and field and the nuances of track and field, particularly for Paralympics. And a lot of our athletes compete in traditional track and field. Chaz Davis ran for his college as a VI athlete. Lex Gillette was a high school long jumper, actively in his own high school program. So it's not uncommon for VI athletes to be in fact, we hear of lots of them competing in their high school and collegiate programs.
Right. And the California International Marathon was just recently canceled, and Chaz Davis was going to try to pop off an IPC qualifying event at that particular competition. Do you know, for instance, an athlete like him who's trying to qualify for Tokyo and other athletes because events have been canceled? how and what events they, like Chaz, for instance, where can he go then to go on and qualify since that event was canceled?
He can run any, for an IPC event, it takes
Yes.
3 months. Well, let me back up. Houston Marathon, to get that approved, that's a January event.
Right.
It takes usually 3 months prior to get an event IPC approved. Actually, for him, that's 1 month because that's a traditional event that's on the international calendar.
Right.
And so even if it's a collegiate meet, it takes 1 month. If it's a disability only, it takes 3 months. So he could get any of the major marathons that are coming up IPC approved. And I would encourage him to do that. If he doesn't have to declare now where he's going to go, but he could say, I want to try to go to Houston. It's a pretty flat course. It's going to be hot.
Yep.
He could do Denver. That's going to be a little tougher, but if he's still living in Colorado, that wouldn't be so bad.
Right.
He could find even some of the smaller ones, just to get them IPC approved.
Got it. Hey, we're about running out of time here, but so why don't you, for us, end on your most memorable Paralympic experience?
There are lots of them, Mark, as you probably know, but one in particular was 2012, and it wasn't necessarily the best experience for the US. That night, the Brits had Johnny Peacock running, and it was against Richard Brown and Jared Wallace and Blake Leeper. And
amputees? Amputee runner?
Yep, it was an amputee race. And the crowd was enormous. We had about 80,000 people in that stadium.
I was there that night.
Packed.
Right.
I think that moment probably changed Paralympic sport forever.
How?
Because the crowd really appreciated the athleticism. Peacock beat us by just a little bit, but he still won. And the crowd chanted his name for I don't know how long. It erupted. The stadium vibrated. The seats in the stadium vibrated. It was so amazing. And then later that night, David Weir, another Brit, did the same thing. And the athletes on the track, they chanted his name. It was a 1,500-meter race. They chanted David Weir's name all the way around the track for the whole 1,500-meter. And when he crossed the finish line, again, the eruption, it was deafening. The athletes on the track said they felt their racing chairs vibrating from the sound of the crowd. Nice. So I hope that Tokyo, I mean, with COVID, it's going to be tough, but I hope with Tokyo, it erupts like that again, because it was simply amazing. My favorite VI was in Italy with Lex Gillette, and Lex popped.
World Championships?
No, it was a little meet in Grosseto. It was an IPC Grand Prix meet in Grosseto. Lex had a beautiful jump, and it was a foul, but it was such a beautiful jump. You knew that was going to be a new world record, but he just fouled it just off the toe board. But when you see, sometimes it's not about the success,
right?
About the effort, and it was just beautiful.
Nice.
So there you go.
Thanks for sharing that. You had me just about in tears over I felt my London experience all over again, sitting in the stands and watching those moments in time for the Paralympic movement and how far it's come. And you've been so instrumental in the movement here in the United States with the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, with VI athletes, and also internationally. So we are so grateful to you on what you have done for VI track and field athletes over the course of your stellar career.
Well, thank you. We need more.
We do need more. We need more athletes. And And so we're going to end with this, and that in less than 1 hour, in about 55 minutes, we're going to have Eleanor Cox from Achilles International speaking tonight about accessibility and running with guide runners. And she's the director of U.S. chapter development in the United States. So those of you who are on, you won't want to miss that. And then that'll wrap up National Blind Sports Week. And congratulations to Kat Beaucamp on running such a successful program here with staff with US ABA. And then tomorrow we'll be running our third annual National Blind Sports Day. We're trying to get Congress to approve that, and one day we will have that approved by next year. And anyone and everyone needs to get out there and play tomorrow and post your pictures on social media, your favorite social media. And don't forget to tag USABA and hashtag Blind Sports Week. So thank you, Kathy Sellers, for your stellar seminar this evening. And we'll see you all in about 55 minutes to hear Eleanor Cox from Achilles International Track Club. Kathy Sellers, thank you again, and have a wonderful night, everyone.
You bet. Bye.